Hello class, hello everyone. Welcome to Teacher Harold TV. This is Teacher Harold and for today's vlog, ayan, welcome pala kasi this is my third video na. Pero this is the first time po na makikita nyo ako dito sa aking YouTube channel. Yung previous two videos, parang ano lang siya, parang mga avatar, ayan. So hindi pa ako nagpakita. So this time, eto na po, eto, alright. Pag-uusapan natin, ayan. Alright, so for today's video, sabi ko nga, medyo mahirap yung sitwasyon natin ngayon kasi hindi tayo nagkikita. Ayan, hindi nyo nakikita si teacher, si ma'am, si sir, ayan. Kasi dahil nga sa pandemya, ayan, naka-work from home ang mga teachers at naka-SLM naman kayo, self-learning modules, no? So yun yung ginagamit at ginagawa nyo ngayon. Nagmo-module kayo instead of going to school na nakasanayan natin dati na araw-araw tayo nagkikita, araw-araw tayo nagkakamustahan, araw-araw tayong nagdi-discuss ng mga lessons natin. So medyo this time medyo mas mahirap ang buhay kasi nga you have to work on your own, diba? Oh no! Kaya nga po, meron tayong YouTube channels na para sa ginawa ng mga teachers ninyo para matulungan kayo sa mga kailangan yung malaman, ayan, kailangan i-discuss para matulungan namin kayo. Well, anyway, kung bago ka pa lang sa channel na to, please don't forget to click subscribe and the notification bell para like kang updated sa mga bagong lessons natin. Anyway, ang mga i-discuss ko dito sa YouTube channel ko na ito ay tungkol sa mga lessons na nakabase sa MELCs natin, sa most essential learning competencies na binigay ng school. Ayan, so i-discuss ko yung ilang parts dun sa modules natin, and I hope na makatulong itong channel na ito para sa pag-aaral ninyo ngayong naka-distance learning tayo. Alright, for today's video, pag-aaralan natin ang tungkol sa communication barrier. Nasa week 3 na tayo at kasama ito dun sa module ng oral communication in context, communication barrier, communication breakdown. Alright, so let's go. Let's talk about communication barrier. Ano ba ang tinatawag nilang communication barrier? Okay, the word itself, barrier, talks about hindrance, ano? Pag sinabi natin hindrance, ito yung mga hadlang para maging effective yung daloy or yung process ng communication na meron tayong na ginagawa natin, alright? So, there are many reasons why interpersonal communication may fail. Madami, di ba? As a communicator, dapat alam natin, to become an effective communicator, we should recognize that these barriers can hinder the communication process. So, pag nagsasalita tayo, parang ngayon, di ba, nandito ako sa harapan ninyo sa pamamagitan ng channel, I know that there are some barriers that still hinders my purpose of having an effective communication with you guys kasi nga hindi tayo nakikita. So me as the sender of the message ngayong araw na ito, at alam niyo din dapat kung ano yung mga magiging barriers sa akin at sa inyo na receiver. Okay? Now let's talk about pag-usapan natin ano ba yung mga iba't ibang klase ng barriers, no? Meron tayong first, language barrier, pangalawa, psychological barrier, physiological barrier, physical barriers, attitudinal barriers, yung using generalization as stereotypes, jumping to immediate conclusions, dysfunctional feedbacks, lacking of confidence, and cultural barriers. Okay, first, let's talk about language barrier. Ano po ba itong language barrier na tinatawag natin? Language and our linguistic ability really hinders effective communication process to take place. Paano nangyayari yon? Sabi niyo, when a person uses inappropriate words while conversing or writing, it could lead to misunderstanding between the sender and the receiver. Paano po nagiging barrier ang language? Syempre, pag, let's say for example, you are talking to someone na hindi naman marunong sa ibang lengguwahe, let's say English, di ba? Nakikipag-usap ka sa kanya, pero hindi kanya naiintindihan. Naririnig ka niya probably, di ba? Pero magiging barrier pa rin yung understanding niya doon sa sinasabi mo. Alright? So what are the factors that causing language barrier? First is multi-language. Alright? Yun nga po, yung pagkakaroon natin ng iba't ibang language. Let's say, for example, one who is English-speaking person and the other one is a non-English speaker. Diba? So, malamang, magkakaroon sila ng language barrier and kasi nga, they cannot converse with each other kasi iba yung language na alam nila. Right? Hindi sila magkakaintindihan kasi iba yung alam nilang pareho. Right? 'Di ba? When we are talking to a native speaker of English, parang sometimes pag nakikinig tayo sa kanila, parang ang hirap-hirap intindihin. It's not because we do not speak English, but it's because of the regional accent, because of the tongue, the native tongue of the sender or the speaker. Kaya medyo nahihirapan tayong intindihin yung sinasabi nila, and that language becomes barrier. Alright? Inadequate vocabulary, kasama rin po yan. Isa rin sa mga factors kung bakit nagiging hindrance or naging sa communication. Inadequate vocabulary. Konti lang kasi yung alam mong salita dun sa language na ginagamit. Kaya hindi ka masyadong makapag-converse. Ayun, barrier na yon. Kasi hindi mo ma-express yung sarili mo kasi nga kulang ka ng mga salitang gagamitin. Hindi mo alam yung mga ibang sasabihin mo because you do not know ano ba yung word na para dito, ano ba yung right translation nito from your own language to language na ginagamit para maintindihan ka. Ayan. That becomes a barrier already. Alright. Another example pala is yung jargon, the use of jargon. This is a very common type of very common reason kung bakit nagiging barrier ang language, the use of jargon. Diba? What is jargon? Diba sabi nila, these are the technical terms. This is the set of vocabulary in a certain field. Let's say for example sa mga doctors, diba? May mga may mga certain vocabularies lang ginagamit that we people not from the medical field will not be able to understand. Pag pinag-uusapan ay kinakausap kanila using their language, using their jargons, hindi kayo nagkakaintindihan, di ba? And that becomes a barrier. How can we overcome this language as a barrier? Alright, or this language barrier? First is you have to speak slowly and clearly. Lalong-lalo na if you are parang a speaker of a specific language at ang kinakausap mo hindi mo ka-language, and then you're trying to use their language, you have to speak clearly and slowly to the point na dapat ay naiintindihan ka nila. Right? So that is your responsibility as the sender or as the speaker. You have to make yourself clear, right? Para maiwasan po natin na maging barrier ang language. Alright? And then you as the receiver, how to overcome language as a barrier also is you ask for clarification. Pag hindi mo naintindihan, let's say kinausap ka ng doctor, may mga terms siyang ginamit, may mga parang terms na hindi mo talaga naiintindihan, you ask for clarification. Ano po ang ibig sabihin nito? Alright? Next is frequent check for understanding. That's one way on how can we overcome language barrier. If you are the speaker, may sinasabi ka sa kanila and then you're using a particular language, you always ask them, do you understand? Check for understanding. Naiintindihan ka ba nila, or just a talking tongue there na parang salita ka ng salita pero hindi naman nila naiintindihan kung ano yung sinasabi mo. Alright, so as the speaker, it is very important that you should ask questions, you should check for the comprehension of your listeners. Alright, now let's have another barrier. Ito po yung tinatawag nilang psychological barrier. Alright, or psychological barriers. Psychological barriers of communication is the influence of the psychological state of the communicator. Whether both the sender and the receiver, which creates obstacle for effective communication. So the psychological barrier is often related to the emotional barriers. Yung lagay, the state of the mind of the sender or the receiver. It's many times emotional barrier on your part or part of the person you are speaking, which may inhibit your ability to communicate the level effectively. Alright? So pag meron kang mga sa isip mo, something which is about your psychological state. Let's say for example, you are stressed. 'Di ba? Kahit pag-gaano ka, parang ngayon, let's say for example, if you are stressed and then you're listening to me, trying to explain the barriers for communication, no matter how hard I try to express myself or to explain myself using the simplest language that I could think, hindi mo pa rin siya maiintindihan kasi nga po, stress ka. Alright? So as the sender or as the receiver, bago ka magsalita, in order for you to become an effective communicator and effective listener, you have to be stress-free. Alright? Kailangan nakakondisyon yung mind mo na makinig. Alright? Another is example ng psychological barrier is your anger. Galit ka ba when you're talking, di ba? lalong-lalo na 'di ba 'pag galit tayo, when you are happy and when you are angry. 'Di ba may mga nasasabi tayo na mga bagay-bagay na hindi natin sinasadya. Nadala ka ng bugso ng damdamin. So, parang gano'n 'no. 'Yun yung psychological barrier. Hindi mo naiintindihan, it's because you're angry. Hindi mo naiintindihan because you're too much happy that as of that moment, 'di ba? And that becomes a barrier na for communication. Lalong-lalo na po yung anger, ano? 'Pag kunyari galit ka at may nagpapaliwanag sa'yo, hindi mo maintindihan. Hindi mo talaga siya maiintindihan kasi nga galit ka. Alright? So, that's one of the ano din. Low self-esteem or lack of confidence also associated with psychological barriers. Alright. Another associated to psychological barriers are emotions, various emotions like fear, nervousness, confusion, mistrust, and jealousy. Ayan. Pag nararamdaman mo po yan while you are talking or while you are listening, communication will never be effective. Will not, the communication process will not take place effectively or properly. Now, how can we overcome these psychological barriers? Number one, motivation and commitment to change. Right? Practice expressing recognition. It's in the state of the it's the state of the mind of the sender or the receiver. So makakagawa po niyan, makakatulong po sa mga sarili natin. Pagdating po sa barrier na yan ay ang mga sarili din natin. Alright? Now, let's have another barrier, ang physiological barriers. A receiver with reduced hearing may may not grasp the entirely of the spoken conversation. Medyo may problema sa pandinig, right? So medyo it is expected na magkakaroon talaga ng communication breakdown or communication barrier kasi nga medyo mahina ang pandinig ng isang tao. Alright? So parang, and then another is when the person has speaking difficulties, right? So magiging mahirap yung pagsasalita niya, magiging mahirap yung pag-intindi ng mga listeners sa kung ano ang sinasabi niya. Okay? Physiological barriers also may result from individuals' personal discomfort by ill health, poor eyesight, or hearing difficulties, gaya nga ng sabi natin. Ano, if you are, let's say for example, you are not feeling well, and then you are, when somebody talks to you, and then somebody asks you to explain something, parang hindi mo siya ma-explain ng mabuti. It's because probably masakit ang ulo mo, di ba? Kahit pa alam mo yung mga bagay na yun, when you have this kind of state, or you have your ill health, di ba? Medyo magiging mahirap talaga para sa part mo as the sender, and it will be hard in the part of the receiver of your message. Alright. Now, let's have the examples of physiological barriers. Ano ba itong mga tinatawag nila ng physiological barriers? Poor listening skills. Ito po. Aside dun sa poor listening skill na talagang deaf, or hindi naman deaf, parang mahina yung pandinig ng isang tao. Aside from that, kasama din po yung poor listening skills. So, mahina kasi talaga, right? Yung pag-process ng information. And eto yung information overload na tinatawag. Probably, it has something to do with the capacity of the person's mind or brain to receive information. Let's say 1 gig, right? 1 gig lang yung ano niya. Let's say for example yung laman ng utak niya. Hanggang doon lang kasi, 'di ba? Hindi na niya kayang maging 1.5, hindi na niya kayang maging 2 gig kasi hanggang 1 gig lang talaga. So yun lang, that's information overload. Pag napuno na yun, parang ayaw na niya makinig, 'di ba? Dumarating tayo sa puntong ganyan, 'di ba? Especially when we are listening to our teachers. Pag ang dami-dami na niyang sinasabi, parang ang hirap-hirap na, 'di ba? Ang hirap nang pakinggan kasi ang dami nang nasabi, ang dami nang napasok sa utak mo na parang feeling natin ay wala nang paglalagyan. Right? It really happens, ano? Ang tawag po natin diyan ay physiological barrier. All right? Now, let's move on to another barrier, the physical barrier, no? So, ano po bang tinatawag nating physical barrier? Physical barrier relates to the disturbance in the immediate situation which can interfere the course of an effective communication. All right? So, physical barrier is the geographic location of the sender and the receiver. Although modern technology often serves to reduce the impact of physical barriers, the advantage and disadvantage of each communication channel should be understood so that an appropriate channel can be used to overcome the physical barrier. So let's say for example, you are parang meters away from the person you are talking. Parang ganyan. Masyadong malayo yung distance nyo kasi distance nyong dalawa. Ano? So parang pag hindi ka sisigaw, hindi ka niya maririnig. Nga niya, although modern technology can serve to reduce the impact of physical barrier, like you could probably use megaphone to amplify your voice para marinig ka nung kausap mo from a distance, or probably you can use a telephone or cell phone to call that person para ma-bridge yung gap, no, yung physical distance between you, the sender, and your receiver. Okay? So how to overcome these physical barriers? Sabi niya, to be updated with the latest technology. Parang ngayon, we have, between the teacher and the student, there is a physical barrier because we cannot go to school and meet each other. Diba? So, anong ginagawa natin? We are using SLM, the self-learning modules, to bridge the gap, no? Para kahit hindi nakikita si teacher tsaka si student, meron pa ring learning na nangyayari. Making signs easier to read. Example, you could implement written signs to or pictures and visual signs. Ito po yung mga ano. Let's say you will not be there forever or every day to parang to say that this way, this way, this way. Alright? Hindi mo naman kayang tumambay doon ng buong araw at sabihin this way ang papasukan ng mga tao. So you can just simply write there this way, or probably you can put an arrow, 'di ba? So to bridge the gap between the sender and the receiver. Now, let's have attitudinal barriers. It has something to do with your attitude as the sender and the receiver. From the word itself, it has something to do with your attitude. Okay, now, let's have the different types of attitudinal barriers. Okay, first is abstracting. Ano bang tinatawag natin na abstracting? It refers to the selective hearing, right? You're being selective with what you want to hear. Parang, let's say, for example, ngayong itong video na ito ay about 30 minutes. You're abstracting kasi. You don't want to listen to the whole thing kasi feeling mo hindi naman importante. Alright? So, you just have to select. You just have to move your cursor kung saan mo siya gustong ilipat at kung ano ang gusto mong pakinggan. Kasi yun lang yung gusto mong pakinggan. You don't want to listen to everything na sinasabi ko. That is what we call abstracting. Ano? It's emotion editing. No, emotion editing is a kind of attitudinal barrier. Ano ba tong emotional editing rather? Based on your personal feelings about a person or a topic. Ito. This is emotional editing if you do not like the topic, and lalong-lalo na if you do not like the person talking. Right? So, parang you don't want to listen because you don't like the speaker. You don't like the way he or she speaks. You don't like the way he or she looks. Parang ganun. 'Di ba? So parang hindi siya, parang it will not hindi niya, it's not pleasing to your eyes, parang gano'n, no? Hindi siya kaaya-aya sa paningin mo, ganyan, kaya ayaw mo makinig, no? No matter how important the things that the person is trying to say, no? If you are emotionally disappointed to disliking someone or something, then you may discount what is being stereotypes or stereotyping, no? You think kasi na, ay, yung sinabi nito, pareho lang sa sinabi niya, parehong oral com teacher yan, parehong English teacher yan, pareho lang yung sinasabi nila. Okay? That is a barrier for effective communication. Prejudice, kasama yan. Kasama po ang prejudice sa attitudinal barriers. What do we mean by prejudice? The act of excluding or disliking someone or something because they belong to a particular group. You're disliking that person or that someone, that something, that topic because they belong to a particular group, and that you don't want to listen to it kasi nga it doesn't serve your appetite again. So pag ganyan ka pong klase ng receiver or the receiver, then you have an attitudinal barrier. Blabbermouth. Ayan. Ano po ang blabbermouth? Kasama yan sa attitudinal barrier. They go on speaking. When you are talking to someone, tapos hindi siya tumitigil, salita pa rin siya ng salita, parang ayaw mo siyang kausapin kasi nga, pag sinimulan mo siyang kausapin, tuloy-tuloy yung pagsasalita niya, at to the point na hindi ka na nagkakaroon ng chance para makapagsalita. Okay, so that is blabbermouth. And they have a lot of energies, no? Parang, pag kinausap mo, yan, isa pa lang nasasabi mo, 1,000 na sa kanya. Right? So, how to overcome this attitudinal barrier? Be a good listener. Okay? So, if somebody is talking, no matter, kahit pa sabihin na natin, you do not like the person, you do not like the face, the looks, the dress, the color of the dress, or so on and so forth, you have to be a good listener kasi Diba? It's not about the person naman who's talking. It's about what is the person is going to say. Okay? Wag judgmental. Don't be reactive, be responsive. Alright? Express yourself. Let others speak. Be honest and listen to yourself. Next one, we have using generalization and stereotypes, no? Sabi niya, speakers who have unqualified generalizations undermine their own clarity or credibility, no? So you are generalizing. You used to generalize things, parang narinig mo pa lang to, ay narinig ko na yan dati, ganito yan, ganito rin ang magiging ending niyan, right? Ganito rin yung sasabihin niya. Okay, so be careful how to overcome it. So be careful not to hold on the preconception about people or thing, right? We often have the tendency to see what we want to see, forming an impression from a small amount of information or one experience, and assuming to be highly representative of the whole person or situation, thinking that one person is the representative of all, or one thing, one scenario, one experience is representative of all. Parang ganon. So you are trying to generalize things kasi based on how you perceive it, based on how you experience it, based on how you understood things, ano? So barrier po yan sa communication natin kasi let's say for example, when someone is talking at parang feeling mo narinig mo na yun na you're not going to listen anymore kasi you think that that person has something the same, di ba? The same yung sasabihin niya, pareho lang sasabihin niya, kaya you don't want to listen to. That is generalization and stereotyping. Kasama rin dyan yung parang another is the jumping to an immediate conclusion. Alright, so you're already generalizing then kasi you are really jumping into conclusions na parang it's not yet explained to you, but then you want to jumping to conclusions about speakers is another it's another barrier to effective communication. Right, so perhaps you've been an audience and speaker makes a small mistake, sabi niya, maybe it's mispronouncing of words or misstating the hometown of your favorite athlete. So lang siya, parang at one point nagkamali lang siya ng sasabihin at feeling mo ay that person is parang mahina or hindi siya, sabi natin bobo, parang ganun, nagkamali lang siya ng isang beses, parang you're jumping into conclusions na ganun na nga siyang klase ng tao. Alright, so ayan, hindrance po siya sa effective communication. Dysfunctional feedbacks, kasama rin po yan. Dysfunctional feedbacks is when we are ignoring the suggestions, the query of our listeners. So, interrupting others while they are talking also creates a poor atmosphere for communication. When we ignore, when we do not give attention to the questions, to the suggestions, and we just focus on ourselves, that serves also a barrier for communication, so, and also when we are interrupting, when somebody's talking and then you're also talking there, lagi nangyayari ito sa loob ng classroom when the teacher is discussing and then the students at the back also discuss with each other. Meron din silang sariling topic, parang ganyan. Ayan. So, isa siya sa mga nakaka-create ng communication breakdown between the teacher as someone who is the sender and to the students who are the receiver. Okay, so how to overcome it? Give constructive response and listen to the audience, right? Listen to suggestions, listen to questions, try to answer the questions, and be responsive. Okay, so yun yung mga nandun sa self-learning module natin tungkol sa mga barriers to effective communication. But aside from that, we also have gender barriers, we also have perceptual barriers, organizational barriers, and a lot more. Basta lahat ng bagay na maaaring magkaroon ng maging hindrance, magiging balakid para hindi maging maayos yung daloy ng communication, we call them communication barriers. Okay? So, I think that's all for now, and just have to see you on our next video at pag-uusapan natin yung iba pang mga bagay na nandun sa ating self-learning modules. Alright, so that will be all for now, and thank you, and class dismiss.